In this first overview, I want to explain what I think has gone wrong in many modern Christian debates about men and women. Not because people aren't reading the Bible, and not because people don't care about faithfulness, but because most of the debate begins with a question that Paul is not actually asking. Here is the pattern. Most modern discussion assumes that the central problem Christian teaching must solve is power in fallen relationships. We assume relationships are unstable, power will be abused, domination is a constant threat, and therefore Christian order must be designed as a safety system. From that starting point, two strategies typically appear. One strategy says, the danger is domination, so we need clear authority structures, clear boundaries, and clear limits, so that power can be constrained, directed, and exercised safely. The other strategy says, power itself is the problem, so we must flatten roles, neutralize authority, and minimize asymmetry, so that nobody stands over another. Those approaches argue with each other, but they share something deeper. They share the assumption that Genesis 3 is the governing horizon of Christian relational life. Genesis 3 does matter. It names the rupture, the distortion, and the consequences of sin. But Genesis 3 is not a blueprint. It is a diagnosis. Genesis 3 describes what happens when human beings stop receiving life from God and start securing life for themselves. And when that happens, relationships change shape. Trust collapses. Desire becomes rivalry. Self-giving becomes domination. Difference becomes threat. And order becomes power struggle. Much Christian thinking quietly treats those distortions as the permanent conditions that must now govern Christian ethics. So the question becomes, how do we build stable Christian order inside a world defined by domination and rivalry? But Paul does not begin there. Paul does not ask how power can be made safer. He asks how the original created relational truths are to be made visible again in those who are new creations in Christ. That is a different question, and it produces a different way of reading the texts. Instead of organizing relationships around control, Paul repeatedly speaks in terms of origin, gift, posture, fitting response, and glory. Because Paul's concern is not simply that Christians behave well. His concern is that redeemed reality becomes publicly recognizable. The gospel is not only preached, it is embodied. So segment 1, the diagnosis, does one thing. It shows that if Genesis 3 governs your starting point, power will inevitably govern your ethics. Paul is reasoning upstream, from creation restored through Christ. In the next overview, we'll see why this is exactly why Paul refuses the modern categories themselves.